Phillies assistant GM Scott Proefrock, always kind enough to join us for a couple moments. Scott, good to talk to you again, my friend. How you been?
Doing good, Rich. Did you vote today?
In what regard? Where are we going?
Well, you got the New Jersey governor race there. You got to get out and vote, man.
Oh, listen, I do my due diligence. I do my community service. I do everything, Scott. I thought I was talking about the Hall of Fame voting with the baseball.
No.
I keep this show is sports, Scott.
All right.
Did you get out and vote?
Well, I live in Maryland, so there's no election today, but so I would have if there was one. So
well, I'm glad we straightened that out. All right, listen, let's get back to the game at hand, if you will. Listen, that's a outside the box hire there with Kapler, and I listened to the press conference, and you can see right off the bat passion, feistiness. He seemed to say all the right things. When we spoke a couple months ago, I know you mentioned that you guys were looking for a person perhaps recently removed from the game, more of an analytical guy. And I'm just curious, what sold you on Kapler? What sold you on Gabe?
Well, I think he fits both those criteria. He's he didn't play. Well, I don't remember last year was maybe 2011 or 2010, so he's not that long off the field. Very analytically inclined, and again, I can't tell you enough positive things about my interactions with him so far. He's very dynamic personality, very energetic, very enthusiastic, and very focused on creating an environment where our players can succeed. And I think it's going to be a very, very enjoyable and interesting a run as we go forward, not only for our fans but for our players and for everybody here in the front office as well.
I know Pete was a former player, had managerial experience, cup of coffee for around 30 games with the Pirates, more time with the Reds in 2007, last 2 seasons with you guys. You look at Gabe, as you mentioned, minor leaguer, played at a high level. 1 season, though, under his belt as a manager in single-A ball. Were there any concerns about the lack of experience in that regard?
I don't think so. I think we'll surround him with a staff that can complement what his strengths are. And, the last, I think he's been with the Dodgers for, 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years, yeah.
In the development, as a player development director. I mean, that's a pretty amazing, training ground for, being a major league manager. I mean, you're basically running, 6, 7, 8 clubs, depending on, you include the Dominican and whatnot and the Latin American programs. And, you got to hire managers. You got to have a criteria that you want to have in a manager. You got to have, the philosophies and the bunt plays and, all the things that you got to, set for the whole organization. So he's had a tremendous amount of experience in, lining up and developing his own philosophies, and I know he and Matt, hit it off, and I think we're going to have a lot of very interesting and exciting times here going forward.
Just to paraphrase, when I heard some of the comments from Matt, he was talking about, when you lose 90 games in a season, and you have young players, expectations when you make a hire like this, I think certain expectations come with this type of hire. You're a younger team. Listen, you can't tolerate 90 lost seasons anymore is kind of my point. And I listened to when Pete was dismissed, and I remember what Clintack said, again, lack of a better term, need new leadership for the next phase of the rebuild. With that being said, do now with this hire and you guys being a young team going in a different direction with the analytics to some extent, the expectations do have to change now, yes?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was generally when we made the change in the manager. I think we were acknowledging that there was the next step of the rebuild had the time had come to move forward with somebody who was going to be in a position to lead us long term into the future. I mean, Pete did a great job of nurturing these young guys, showing them the ropes, and doing the things that we needed him to do, to help them develop at the major league level. We just felt like it was time to move from the sort of a transitional manager, which, I don't think anybody, including Pete, thought that he was necessarily the guy that was going to be here to take us to the next level. But he did a great job, and I'm thankful he's still with the organization because his experience and knowledge of the players and will be a great resource for all of us, going forward. And he's going to get to reap some of the benefits of his work as well by continuing to be a part of it. So, but I think we all knew that there was going to be a time when it was we were ready for new leadership, and Gabe's gonna, there's going to be some growing pains, but we still have a lot of young players that are going to have growing pains as well. And I think that's a great opportunity for them to, sort of develop relationships and evolve into a contending team together.
When you go back to the analytical side, you look at last year with the Indians and the Cubs, and then this season, you really don't have to look any closer than the World Series with Houston and L.A. I mean, we're really witnessing analytical details. They become a key force in development for so many teams around baseball. It seems like there's more in the forefront now than ever before. It's more visible. And there's more expectations about how to utilize that information. I remember a couple of years ago, Ruben mentioned, maybe this is kind of a direction we might want to go. And I do believe you still have Scott Friedman on the staff, correct? You guys hired him back in 2013.
Right.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going with this, did you guys just this year all of a sudden say to yourself, well, maybe, and I say this with respect, maybe we were a little behind with the times and we got to catch up a little bit. Did that also go into this hire? I
don't think so.
Okay.
I think that decision, was made more, when the transition was made from Ruben to Matt. I think Mr. Middleton, had, and again, we had already been doing some things internally.
Yes.
To build our proprietary database. To hold the information, and we were in the process of figuring out ways to to use the information and provide it to the players, and that process accelerated dramatically when Matt came on board, and it's continued, and honestly to the point where Scott really isn't involved in it that much anymore. Andy Galdi and Louis Paulus and Alex Nakahara, and there's a whole slew of people that are probably more in the area where they're
a little more versed in that.
Well, they're more technically oriented, to take us where we want to get to in that, and the department is continuing to expand. And Sam Fold is a guy that we brought on to sort of be the liaison between the analytics department and what they can generate, and communicating it to the staff and to the players in an understandable format, sort of try to be a filter and a translator for some of the information that can be implemented by the players. So that's sort of the that's a model that a lot of teams have used, and we're going to use it. But again, you can go back to some of the comments of some of those teams, and you have to have the information. There's no question about it, but there's also the human aspect to it. You can look at some of the things that the Astros did. They brought in a McCann and a Beltran,
veteran guys.
There's and you listen to some of the things that AJ Hinch has said about the marriage of the analytics and the human factor. And again, I think we've got a guy in Gabe that is very in tune with what's available analytically, but also very, very focused on creating an environment for these players to be comfortable and to be able to get the most out of their abilities.
Yeah, and that's the key, and you kind of stole my thunder on that one. It's not really about building a player, but building the culture and the environment, and then typically that'll lead to success on the field. You guys are a young team. We know that. You look at the infield. It's from top to bottom. You guys have a ton of talent in that infield. Now, I know Franco has struggled. He also hit 24 home runs. He's still 25. So, to me, you let that just play out. Even if you could Crawford at short, Kingery or Hernandez at second, Galvis, that's a great role from a utility standpoint. I'm curious, going into this offseason, I think it's a big offseason for you guys because I think pitching should be at the forefront. Now, again, I don't make those decisions, but I'm just curious, when you look at your rotation last year and your starters and your frontline guys, the guys like Nola, and even though it doesn't work out with Buchholz and Velasquez gets hurt, do you believe pitching is going to be a priority going into the offseason?
Well, I think it always is, but I think some of the answers, some of the solutions are guys that we have, whether it's a Zach Eflin or Jake Thompson or Eichhoff bouncing back, or Vince Velasquez, hopefully, having some issues resolved health-wise. The one thing we got to remember, Rich, is these guys don't develop in a straight line. I mean, look at Aaron. I mean, Aaron had some bumps in the road last year, and obviously an injury as well. I mean, in 2016, I'm talking about, not 2017. But so there's not a necessarily they get it to the major leagues, and I mean, Jared Eichhoff pitched 190 plus innings in 2016 and then struggled last year.
Look at Charlie Morton, Scott. Right?
They're still making. Well, he's a little bit of a different case because he's a veteran, but these young guys, they're still sort of feeling their way, and I think that they're going to have to make adjustments as the league adjusts to them, and I think that's part of the process of and eventually one of the things they hopefully learn is how to do it, on the fly and in game and from week to week instead of from season to season. And I think that's something we can expect to see from these guys, especially the guys that had some health issues that hopefully are remedied and can get out there spring training, have a complete healthy off season, and be ready to go and build towards starting the season with everything pointing in the right direction.
And listen, it takes time, and I bring up a guy because sometimes guys, they peak at a certain point in their career. How about the bullpen with Neris? Because I thought he did an outstanding job, especially the second half of the season. I don't know if you can speak to it too much, but is going into spring training in April, would that be his job to lose?
It just depends on what direction we decide to go to. I mean, he obviously had some struggles early in the year, and I know he saved a significant number, consecutively at the end of the year. But I mean, I can honestly tell you from watching some of those, they weren't wasn't necessarily a lockdown situation. And again, I think we're open to having improvements in the bullpen, and it just depends on what's available. And who fits. And I think the way bullpens are evolving, I don't know whether it's necessarily a set of circumstances where, you have set roles. If you have guys that can do, have good enough stuff and be able to, and pitch at the end of the game. I don't know if, we're evolving to a point where, you don't have necessarily a designated closer. You have two or three guys that can end the game for you, just because we're sort of evolving to a situation where you're not expecting to get much more than 5 or 6 innings out of your rotation, and then you got to fill the rest of it with the bullpen. And at some point you got to be able to have somebody. You can't pitch guys 5-6 days in a row. You're going to have guys that can perform multiple pitch in multiple situations out of the bullpen, and that's how you build a good bullpen, I think.
It's tough because you look at what's going on in the NL East and with Washington and the Mets with the changes, the managerial changes and whatnot, and then you look at the move that you guys made, and then I look at some other teams around baseball that came out of nowhere. Colorado. Young team, but they scored a lot of runs. Arizona made that nice little run. Minnesota won a ton of games on the road. They had the pitching. You look at Houston a couple years ago; they were one of the bottom feeders in the bigs, losing 100 games left and right. They win a World Series. Can you see in 2 to 3 years? And I know it's kind of hindsight looking in the crystal ball, but you can almost kind of draw parallels. But those teams were also young teams on the rise as well. I mean, when you see some of those teams with that quick turnaround or 2 or 3 year turnaround, is that kind of where you envision this club in the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, again, I think it all depends upon how these guys continue to grow. I think I've said this to you before, but we had a scout when I was with the Braves, Ralph Garr.
Yep.
It says, once they get to the major leagues, I can tell you who's going to get to the major leagues, but once they get there, they seek their own level.
Right.
And these guys are still, still in that process. And, I think we're certainly well positioned to take the players that we have here and supplement them with our resources. We also have enough depth to be able to not only sign a player in free agency, because of the resources we have financially, but also the resources we have depth-wise in the minor leagues. We have significant depth to the point where we can trade for players as well. So I think we have a lot of options as to how to improve the team, and again, that's our mission, is to continue to get better, and we're going to explore every opportunity in every way there is to do that. So, and use whatever resources we have at our hands, to do that.
Yeah, the farm system's deep, and I'll tell you, the one thing, and I know we had this conversation. Sometimes the fan base, they get impatient. They're clamoring to see some of the young guys. They want those September call-ups, and as you alluded to, sometimes, it's not always that straight path. Sometimes there's a couple bumps in the road. But from what you saw from some of these young guys, and then Williams and Hoskins, and the power there, and it seemed to excite some of the fan base. I mean, you obviously you guys can build on that going forward.
No, I mean, this is an exciting time to be, a Phillies fan and a Phillies employee. I mean, there's definitely things to really look forward to and to be excited about, and we are, and I think Gabe is going to be the face of that, in the short term, and hopefully in the long term as well. But I think some of the players, as they come to the forefront, will overshadow obviously the manager, and be what we hope. The fans are most excited about is the talent we put on the field. But I think we've got a great leader, to take us where we want to go.
Scott, always appreciate it, my friend, and I always appreciate you reminding me to do my civic duties.
Well, everybody get out and vote.
It's like a PSA. Hey, we'll talk before spring training. I always appreciate it, pal.
All right, Rich, take care.
You got to take care of yourself. Scott Proefrock, couple minutes assistant GM with the Philadelphia Phillies.